Hi there, and welcome to Fuzzy on the Details. My name is Fuzzy, and if you're interested in the Marvel Multiverse Role-Playing Game, you have come to the right place. Today's video is part 3 in our How to Play series that covers the basics of the game. We will review chapters 5, 6, and 7 of the Core Rulebook, covering everything you need to know to create a character for the game. We'll have a walkthrough example at the end. If you haven't seen part 1 and 2 of the series, which focuses on the core game mechanics and combat, you may want to give them a watch first. Links are in the description. Okay, let's get into the details. There are multiple ways you can create a character for this game. The easiest is to just select a character out of the Core Rulebook or Cataclysm of Kang and go. Alternately, you can select a character out of the book, keep it at the same rank, but make a few tweaks. An example of this might be playing Deadpool, but giving him more capabilities with firearms, since the version in the book is all melee and martial. Also, you can take a character out of the book, but raise or lower their rank and overall power. For example, a lot of folks think that Daredevil should be rank 3. No problem. Matt Forbeck, the game's author, actively encourages these types of changes. You can create an established Marvel character that just isn't in the game yet. Or you can create your own completely unique character. It's important to note that your party can be a mix and match of these approaches, and it doesn't really have any impact on how you play. Finally, you can create the character online or with pen and paper. Both Demiplane and Roll20 will guide you through the process and make sure you're not accidentally overlooking prerequisites or restrictions. The Core Rulebook suggests you build the character in this order: rank, ability scores, backstory, and powers. They do say you don't have to do things in this order, so feel free to do whatever you feel comfortable with, but I myself have a preferred order, especially for those who are new to the game. I don't like doing ability scores so early in the process because until you've selected your powers, you won't really know what ability scores you'll want to invest the most in. And it's not always so intuitive. As an example, some of the lower rank elemental powers use agility for attacking, but at rank 3 or so, many of them are ego-based. You might not realize this until you've actually selected those powers. Also, there's a good chance you're going to bounce back to abilities anyway, because if you don't fill out all of your power slots, or if you don't select from a wide variety of power sets, you may find yourself with some extra points to spend on ability scores. We'll cover this in detail when we get to powers, but for now, all you need to know is that there are multiple ways to boost your ability scores. So the first step is to determine rank. Rank is a rough reflection of your character's power, but perhaps more importantly, it helps define the types of stories you and your narrator want to tell. So as an example, Ms. Marvel at rank 3 is the kind of hero that protects a city. She's an Inhuman in the game, but more recently in the comics, she's been revealed to be a mutant. The types of stories she's involved in have changed. She's joined the X-Men, and her adventures have been on a grander scale, facing threats to all of mutant kind versus more localized threats. If you were to stat up an X-Men version of her, you might want to do so at rank 4, so she can more easily participate in those stories. And hey, this is not a science, and you've got wiggle room within the ranks. If you want to boost Daredevil from rank 2 to rank 3, but still have him play at the neighborhood level and stay in Hell's Kitchen, you're not alone. If you think Nightcrawler at rank 3 is a grave injustice, and you want to bamf him up to rank 4 so he can be balanced with Wolverine and Colossus, that's super easy to do, and these types of tweaks are again encouraged by the game's author. It's a good idea to set your maximum level at the start of play, but there's really no mechanical reason you couldn't just stop before you get there if you're having too much fun playing at a certain rank. So rank is more than just a storytelling guideline. There are many mechanics in the game that use it. It determines how many ability points, powers, and traits you have by default, and it controls your damage multiplier and, if you have the heroic tag, karma. Next, we select our origin. This is where your powers come from. The full list of origins starts on page 52, or can be viewed easily on Roll20 or Demiplane. But here are the important things to keep in mind. You can have more than one origin. Forge is a great example of this. He's a mutant, he has cybernetics, and he wields magic. And he benefits from each one of those origins. To get multiple origins, you can take the Extraordinary Origin trait. Origins are more than just a role-playing tool. They can grant you a trait or tags or more. In some cases, power sets may be restricted by your origin. For example, skilled individuals without any real superhuman powers like Nick Fury or Black Widow have the special training origin. They can only select from the melee, ranged, martial arts, shield bearer, and tactics power sets. and certain powers from the basic set as well. Occupation, like Origin, can also grant you traits and/or tags. For example, the Scientist occupation gives you the Inventor and the Scientific Expertise trait and the Lab Access tag. Your occupation can change with your narrator's approval. For example, if you started playing Kate Pryde at rank 1 with the Student occupation, but now she's running the X-Men team in your game, you probably want to give her the Leader occupation. There's also a way to get extra occupations, the appropriately named Extra Occupation trait. The full list of occupations begins on page 57 in the Core Rulebook. Once you've got your free traits and tags recorded by locking in your origin and occupation, it makes sense to select any additional traits and tags. As discussed in the rank section, you get one additional trait per rank. You can select as many tags as you want. Two important reminders. The heroic tag is needed if you want your character to have a starting karma. Also, you'll notice that there are some tags that might have what could be considered negative connotations, at least from a mechanical perspective. Hounded, hunted, poor, obligation, etc. These are there as role-playing opportunities. When you do a particularly good job of role-playing your tags, the narrator can use that as an opportunity to grant you extra karma. There are a ton of powers in the game, and more to come when the X-Men expansion comes out. It would be a pretty boring video if I just read all of the powers off to you, so you'll want to take some time to review what's available. But here are some very important things to keep in mind. As mentioned earlier, your origin may restrict what powers you can take. Some powers may have a listed rank prerequisite. You can get around this prerequisite by using the Surprising Power trait. Surprising Power does not get around other prerequisites, just rank. Surprising Power also does not get around the focus cost restrictions that are in place for all powers, meaning each character can only spend up to 5 times their rank of focus at any given point in time. Also, there is no limit to the number of power sets that you can choose from, but there is something that's called a thematic bonus. If you select from fewer power sets than you have ranks, you get an extra power for the difference. So for example, if you're rank 4 and you only choose from 2 power sets, you get 2 extra powers. Now, if you don't want to use all of the powers you've got available to you, you don't have to. You can actually convert them to ability scores or even extra traits. This includes any extra powers that you get from a thematic bonus. And that's a good segue to the next step, selecting your ability scores. Hopefully you can see why it makes sense to do this later in the process. By now, you've got a good sense for what your powers are going to be, so you can assign your stats accordingly. We've reviewed what each one of these ability scores does in the first video of this series, so if you're unclear about anything, go ahead and give that a watch. Important to note, there is a restriction on how high you can raise each ability score. The maximum is rank plus 3. So the highest value you could have at rank 1 would be 4. Another thing to keep in mind is that these scores control not only your offensive abilities, but defensive as well. So if you're playing a brawler type that completely ignores, say, vigilance, ego, and logic, they're going to find themselves not only attacking later than everyone else, but also susceptible to telepathic and telekinetic attacks as well. You can find a description of all of the powers in the game on page 81 of the Core Rulebook. And finally, you want to calculate the remaining scores. So for example, your health score is your resilience times 30. And you'll add a health damage reduction if you have a source for that, like the sturdy, shield, or reinforced skeleton powers. Your focus will be your vigilance times 30, and if you had a trait like battle ready, you could add 30 to that. Your focus damage reduction can come from things like the uncanny power. Karma is equal to your rank, again, if you have the heroic tag. Initiative is simple, that's equal to your vigilance. However, you can put an E next to this value if you have the situational awareness tag, which grants an edge on initiative. Your damage multiplier is your rank, but this can be increased by certain powers. Mighty 1 through 4 can increase your melee multiplier by 1 through 4 points. Accuracy increases your agility. Discipline increases your ego, and brilliance can increase your logic multiplier in the same manner. And your damage bonus comes from your ability scores. Okay, let's get into an example. I'm going to be creating Jubilee from the X-Men, who is not yet in the game, specifically the animated series version of her. At the time of this recording, only the first 2 episodes of X-Men 97 have been released, so I've only got those episodes to pull from, but I've got 5 seasons of the original series. I won't be focusing on anything that happens in the comics, in X-Men Evolution, or in her brief appearances in the Fox X-Men movies. Are you ready to get started?
Does a mall baby chili fries?
I don't actually know. I'll just say yes, so we can get started. You are welcome to play along at home, and we can discuss the different build choices in the comments. This is Demiplane's Character Builder, which gives us the options to create a new character or open and modify characters that are already in the game. We'll want to create Jubilee from scratch, so we'll click here to get a nice blank slate. You can see we have 0s in our ability scores and 10 health and 10 focus, which is the minimum. Our first step is to determine rank. I'm thinking we'll try her out at rank 2. She demonstrated some real offensive punch in the original series, but nothing that can't be recreated with rank 2 powers. And even in X-Men 97, when she should be at her most experienced, the team leaves her out of dangerous missions. Let's jump to biography. Origins is pretty straightforward. She's a mutant. Next, we click on occupation. Mall rat is unfortunately not an option, so I think student will have to do. Next is traits and tags. We can see all of the ones we just got for free, but because we're rank 2, we get 2 more traits to choose. When I think of Jubilee's personality from the original animated series, I recall how hard she fights for her friends and teammates, regardless of the odds or how much she might be overpowered in a fight. She always pushes for action, and she'll take on the Juggernaut, Sauron, Blob, tons of Sentinels, so many enemies that are so much bigger and stronger than her. To me, that's deserving of the fearless trait. And when I think of the first couple episodes of X-Men 97, she was the one to stay with Roberto and make sure he was comfortable, and she even gets him to open up about his power when he wouldn't tell that to anyone else. She's always smiling and cheerful and positive, when so many other members of the team are so serious or grim. I think the glibness trait really fits well here. For tags, we've got to make sure she's got heroic, so she'll get that karma. And you can see when we select it here, her karma populates, 2, which is equal to her rank. Looking through the rest of these tags, we could take headquarters for Xavier's school too. Notice that when you select this, it gives you the option to set the description. Nothing else really calls out to me here with tags. Okay, now on to powers. In the original series, of course, she could do her trademark visual fireworks, but when used offensively, she's been able to knock back Sentinels, and she even blasted Sabretooth through a wall once. She's blown through restraints and punched down giant steel doors. She's also blinded enemies too. I think elemental control is a great place to start looking. We have to pick a specific type of element, and each one has a different effect. Elemental Control Energy has the special effect of blinding opponents on fantastic successes, so to me, that's a no-brainer. When we click on the power set in the Your Power Set section, we can see that there's a toggle up top that will filter the options so you only see the powers you qualify for based on rank and prerequisites. Our only option here is to start with Elemental Burst, so when we select that, we can see that opens up some other options. I definitely want to upgrade her to Elemental Blast, which can do a little extra damage by spending focus. Barrier, Grab, and Infusion don't really feel like great choices to me, so let's move on, at least for now. We can always come back. So let's take a look at the Illusion power to replicate her light-based powers that don't cause damage. I think we definitely want to take Illumination, so Roberto will never need glow sticks again. Once we select that, it opens up some other options, and Dazzle really stands out to me. This can blind characters without harming them. We've absolutely seen her do things like this in the show. So that's 4 down and 4 to go. Let's take a look at the basic power set. You definitely don't want to sleep on that. Accuracy is a great one. I'm reminded of this scene where Wolverine has her shoot out these small targets at a distance, and she nails them with no problem. Her elemental burst and blast powers both rely on agility, so there's real value there. Selecting this opens up accuracy too, but let's see what other options we have. I mentioned how Jubilee is always fighting tougher foes and sometimes really holding her own against them. Combat Trickery specifically works on equal or higher rank enemies, allowing Jubilee to get an automatic fantastic result. This really feels like something that will help her punch up in those situations. Again, to me, this is another no-brainer. None of the other basic powers feel like great fits for me. I was thinking Wisecracker, but while she's chatty, she's not exactly like Spider-Man or Deadpool level with the quips. I'm pretty satisfied with the build so far, so let's consider converting those extra powers into ability points or traits. You can see there's an option to play around with those values up here. One thing I want to consider is the possibility of taking the surprising power trait, to see if that opens up any rank 3 powers that might fit. So let's select that and take a look at Illusion first. Flare looks really interesting. It relies on ego, so let's keep that in mind when we assign ability scores. I like this as a way to recreate that big fireworks display that we see in the opening credits. And with that, all of our powers are taken. You can see we had those 2 extra power slots before, but we used one for the surprising power trait and another one on Flare, so we're good to go. Alright, now we finally go on to the ability scores, and let's remember that we need a good agility and ego for our powers to work well. That works out nicely since glibness also relies on ego. So let's start by putting 3 into each of those 2 abilities. Vigilance and resistance are also very important since they give us health and focus. So let's raise those by 1 to get them to 30. And you can see the values changing up top. She gets knocked out quite a bit in the original animated series, so I don't think she should have a ton of health. But I feel like Vigilance should be a little bit higher so she can actually use her powers a little longer. Especially since one of them is a rank 3 power, which will take 10 focus. Now, what to do with the last one? This is tough. If it was the comics, I might say agility, since she's always drawn flipping around the battlefield, but we don't see a ton of that in the show. Her cheer and positivity keep coming to mind, so you know what? I'm going to give it to ego, which will really help in social situations, and landing that blindness with Flare as well. And with that, we are done. But listen, these are just my choices. What about you? Anything you would have done differently? How might the comic book version of her look differently? Either before or after the whole vampire thing. And by the way, how psyched are you for X-Men 97? The first 2 episodes were so good to me, really brought me back to my youth. I kind of want to set a game in that universe right now. You know, this might be a good time for you to subscribe and hit that notification bell if you haven't already, because my next video is really going to be something special. As a follow-up to this video, I've chatted with 3 of the most prolific character homebrewers on the Marvel Multiverse Facebook page, Reddit, and Discord channel. And they've generously shared a ton of great advice for people who are generating their own characters. Whether it's for you to use as a hero in the game, or if you're a narrator and you're creating threats for your players. I'm really psyched to put a spotlight on these deserving folks, and if you haven't seen their work, you're really in for a treat. Anyway, that's all I got for today, true believers. Thanks as always for watching, and for all of your feedback, and I'm really looking forward to seeing your Jubilee builds in the comments. Have a great day.